Caribbean history and culture is a beautiful mosaic of people from all across the world. It's a fabric woven from pirates and rum, slavery and rebellions, swashbuckling adventures, and exciting West Indian vacations. A truly fascinating story. Join us for all this and more on the Aaron Darcy Project. Hi there, and welcome once again to the Aaron Darcy Project. I am your host, Andrew, and today we have two guests, Jonathan and Deborah, and they're going to be discussing a piece of the history of the West Indies, the slave trade. We hope that this discussion will shed more light on this very intricate part of our history as West Indians. So, sit back and join us as we travel back in time.
All right, ready to dive in. We're tackling a topic you were really curious about, the African slave trade.
Yeah, and we're going deep. Not just like, here are the dates, here's what happened, kind of
We're
thing.
talking full picture. The nuances, the connections, the impact this trade had on, well, everyone. Africa, the Americas, even the world.
It's about understanding a system that, honestly, still shapes the world we live in today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to really get into this, I want you to picture something. It's the 16th century. You're in the West Indies, and the air is thick with the smell of sugar cane.
Sugar.
Right. Europe's going crazy for sugar, coffee, tobacco, all those luxuries. But here's the thing. Have you ever stopped to think about where all that labor came from to actually make those luxuries happen?
It's a question we don't ask enough.
That's where the African slave trade comes in.
And it was massive. The demand for those goods in Europe, it drove everything.
Absolutely.
And this is something that's so important to remember, this wasn't just a story about Europeans coming in and taking people by force.
Yeah.
It's way more complicated than that. We have to talk about the active role that some Africans, traders, and even entire kingdoms played in this system.
And that's something that really stuck with me from the research you sent over. You used the phrase willing participants.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was kind of jarring to read, because it makes you think about those powerful African kingdoms, the Ashanti, Dahomey, Oyo, Whydah.
Empires in their own right.
Exactly. They were deeply involved in this trade. But what was in it for them? What were their motivations?
That is the million-dollar question. And to even begin to answer it, we have to think about the world they were living in at that time.
Okay, so paint the picture for us. What was going on?
Well, you've got these European powers showing up, right? But instead of venturing inland into territory they didn't know, they decided to leverage the systems that were already there. They set up trading posts on the coast.
So they outsourced the actual capturing and transporting of people.
Basically. And it was incredibly strategic. It's easier to bargain with one king than try to conquer an entire continent. And to sweeten the deal, they offered things that those kingdoms really wanted. We're not just talking about trinkets here.
This was serious.
We were talking about guns, a lot of guns.
And I imagine those firearms would have had a huge impact on the balance of power within Africa itself.
Oh, absolutely. It's a tragic ripple effect. These weapons, traded for human lives, fueled more conflict, more instability. It created a system where both the Europeans and the African leaders who participated in the slave trade, they all benefited, but at a horrific, horrific cost.
Yeah, and it's easy to get caught up in all that, the economics, the power struggles. But I think it's really important that we pause here for a second.
Right.
And confront the very real human cost of this trade. Because it's easy to forget. But behind all those deals being made, behind all the gold and the guns,
There were real people.
Millions of them. Millions of individual lives totally shattered by this.
It's almost impossible to grasp the scale of it.
One of the things that really got to me when I was going through your research was this statistic. 40% of enslaved Africans ended up in the West Indies.
It's a staggering number. Just think about the concentration of human suffering that represents.
It really makes you think about those islands differently, Like growing up, we always pictured the Caribbean as this paradise.
Right. Beaches, sunshine.
But the reality is all of that beauty, that culture, it's built on this foundation of forced labor.
Yeah.
The West Indies had one of the highest concentrations of enslaved people anywhere in the Americas.
Absolutely. And to even begin to understand what happened there, we have to talk about the Middle Passage.
I have to say, going through the details you pulled from those historical accounts, it's tough to read.
It should be. We can't look away from it.
It's just, how did anyone survive that journey?
Many didn't. But to answer your question, imagine this. Ships so packed with people that there was barely room to move.
Oh, God.
Disease running rampant, the stench of vomit, human waste, it's all there in the historical records.
It's horrific.
People chained together, lying in their own filth for weeks, sometimes months on end.
It's unimaginable. And even for those who survived the Middle Passage.
They were then forced into a life of grueling labor brutality, stripped of their families, their cultures, everything.
And that trauma, I mean, that kind of dehumanization, it doesn't just go away, does it?
No, absolutely not.
Mm.
The psychological and emotional scars of the slave trade, they echo through generations. Even today, the impact of that trauma is deeply woven into the fabric of so many societies.
It's easy to get caught up in the individual stories.
Yeah.
Those really horrific experiences we were just talking about.
Right.
But the impact of this trade,
It goes so much deeper.
it really does.
It completely reshapes societies.
And not just in the Americas, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about Africa itself.
Exactly. And that's something we often overlook in the West.
It's true.
We focus so much on the impact on the Americas, on Europe, on the global economy.
Right.
But the impact on Africa, it was devastating. I mean, we're talking about a complete disruption of their social and economic fabric.
Well, and one of the sources that you sent over that really stuck with me, it talked about how you had entire communities in Africa for generations centered around agriculture, skilled crafts,
Yeah.
traditional trade, and this system, it just completely upended all of that.
Totally. Because suddenly the most valuable commodity
Became people.
became human beings. Can you imagine that? Societies where, you had skilled artisans, people who were revered for generations for their craft. Now they're forced to trade human lives instead of their creations. It's a complete perversion of any traditional kind of trade and exchange.
And how do you even begin to put a price on a human life, right? Like, that's the core of it, isn't it?
It is. The slave trade, it reduced human beings to commodities.
Yes.
And the ripple effects of that commodification were they're still felt today. Entire regions were stripped of their workforce.
Yeah, their most valuable resource.
Right, but not just in terms of labor. In terms of human potential, think about all the doctors and artists and teachers and leaders.
Generations of them gone.
It's a loss that's almost impossible to calculate.
It's a history that's hard to face, but we have to.
We do. For everyone. Understanding the full scope of what happened, the complexities, even the uncomfortable truths. That's the only way we can even begin to move towards a better future.
It's a history that demands that we ask tough questions, challenge our own assumptions, and never ever forget the millions of lives that were impacted by this. It's heavy stuff. It really is. But that's why we dive deep. Keep learning, keep questioning, and as always, thanks for listening.
Well, there you had it. Short but thought-provoking, right? We do need to continue to explore our roots as Caribbean people in order to understand and appreciate how far we've come. Thank you for joining us on the Aaron Darcy Project. Please do share your thoughts on this and our other content. We welcome your comments. Please like and share this and our other videos with your friends and others, and please consider subscribing to our channel. We look forward to your company on the next episode of the Aaron Darcy Project. Goodbye for now.